An ordinary day, until it isn't anymore. No one notices the exact moment when history changes, because it usually begins in silence. It is the year 1600, and life follows its familiar rhythm. Narrow streets are filled with footsteps, voices, and smells. Merchants call out their goods, children run without worry, families share their daily bread. People trust what they can see, what they can touch, what they can explain. Illnesses have always existed, part of everyday life, like hunger or cold. Most believe the worst is already behind them, that surviving this far is a sign of divine protection or simple luck. What no one imagines is that something invisible is already circulating among embraces, coins, and shared breaths. There is no warning, no clear sign, only small changes that go unnoticed. An unusual tiredness, a fever blamed on hard work. The city feels safe, familiar, predictable. Precisely for that reason, it is vulnerable. The story of smallpox begins this way, not with panic, but with absolute normality. The invisible enemy. The greatest threats rarely announce their arrival. Smallpox does not march like an army, nor does it make noise when it enters a home. It spreads through exchanged glances, through the touch of hands, through the shared air of enclosed spaces. In the 17th century, no one truly understands what is happening. There is no concept of viruses, only vague suspicions and confused explanations. Some believe the illness travels with the wind. Others think it awakens inside the body as a dormant punishment. What is most frightening is its impartiality. The disease strikes rich and poor, young and old, residents of palaces and of modest homes alike. A little-known detail is that many believed surviving smallpox was a sign of moral strength, as if the body had passed a divine test. Meanwhile, the disease advances slowly, taking advantage of limited knowledge and excessive confidence. The enemy is invisible, but its effects soon become impossible to ignore. When fear spreads, fear never appears all at once. It seeps in gradually. First it is a neighbor who falls ill, then someone else on the same street. Conversations change tone, smiles become rare. Doors begin to close earlier, and windows remain shut even during the day. In the 17th century, rumor is almost as powerful as the disease itself. Exaggerated stories travel faster than any messenger, feeding the sense that no one is safe. A little remembered fact is that many cities tried to hide smallpox outbreaks to avoid harming trade, allowing the illness to continue spreading. Churches fill with people seeking explanations and protection, while others avoid any human contact. Fear alters simple habits. Visits are cancelled, markets empty, families isolate within their own homes. Even before the disease is understood, society begins to change, guided by uncertainty. Symptoms and fears. The first sign rarely seems serious. A persistent fever, body aches, a discomfort that is hard to explain. At first, many believe it is just another common illness. But fear soon takes hold, because smallpox does not follow a predictable path. Isolation becomes a necessity, not through scientific understanding, but through pure fear of contagion. Sick individuals are separated from their families, often locked in dark rooms with little food and almost no comfort. A little-known belief of the time was that simply looking directly at a sick person could transmit the illness. The suffering is not only physical, it is social and emotional. The sick are avoided, feared, almost erased from daily life. Smallpox marks not only the body, but also collective memory, linking disease to loneliness. In an era without clear explanations, every symptom becomes a sign of something greater and more terrifying. Medicine of the time. When smallpox takes hold, the medicine of the 17th century reveals its limits. Physicians work with what they believe to be the body's balance, not with invisible causes. Bloodletting, herbs, and strange mixtures are applied with conviction, even without consistent results. Many treatments seem contradictory today, but at the time they represent hope. A curious fact is that some doctors avoided treating smallpox patients out of personal fear, leaving care to family members or healers. Science moves slowly, mixed with superstition and tradition. Instruments are simple, diagnoses based on observation and past experience. Even so, every failed attempt teaches something, even if unconsciously. The fight against smallpox is not only against the disease itself, but against collective ignorance. It is within this landscape of errors and attempts that the first questions begin to emerge, questions that would, centuries later, change the history of medicine. If you want to continue exploring stories that connect the past to the present, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment sharing what caught your attention most in this journey through the 17th century. Silence behind closed doors. At some point, the noise of the streets no longer tells the full story. Behind closed doors, another reality takes shape. Homes become improvised places of care, not because they are prepared, but because there is nowhere else to go. Furniture is pushed aside, windows are kept shut, and the air grows heavy with waiting. Family members speak in lower voices, measuring every movement, every breath. Touch becomes rare, even between parents and children, as fear overrides instinct. A little-known detail is that many households mark their doors with cloths or symbols to warn outsiders, turning private homes into silent warnings. Inside, time seems to stretch. Days blur together, guided by fever, hope, and exhaustion. The house, once a refuge from the world, becomes a fragile boundary between life and loss. In this enforced quiet, people learn a new kind of loneliness. Not the absence of others, but the presence of danger within familiar walls. Smallpox reshapes domestic life, teaching that safety is no longer guaranteed, even at home. Survivors and the marks of memory. Surviving smallpox is not an ending. It is a transformation. Those who recover return to the streets changed, carrying memories that linger long after the fever fades. Survival often brings relief, but also a quiet distance from others. Faces and bodies may bear lasting marks, and with them, altered perceptions. In some communities, these marks are seen as proof of endurance, almost a badge of having faced death and returned. In others, they become a source of discomfort, reminders of a shared trauma people would rather forget. A lesser-known reality is that survivors were sometimes treated with a mix of respect and unease, believed to be both protected and permanently altered. Internally, survivors carry something deeper. The memory of isolation, of silence, of uncertainty reshapes how they see the world. Life feels more fragile, time more valuable. Smallpox leaves behind a living archive of experience, written not in books, but in people. Through them, the disease continues to shape society, long after the outbreak subsides. Impact on society. When smallpox spreads, it affects more than individual bodies. It dismantles the structure of everyday life. Families are separated abruptly. Homes become marked by fear, and streets once full of life grow silent. Trade slows, artisans abandon their workshops, and harvests go uncollected. A rarely discussed detail is that, in some cities, authorities avoided recording deaths caused by smallpox to prevent panic or economic damage. The disease begins to influence political decisions, population movements, and even marriages, postponed out of fear of contagion. Royal families are not immune, and when members of the nobility fall ill, the symbolic impact is enormous. The general feeling is one of instability. Smallpox reveals how much society depends on close human bonds, and how those same bonds can become threats in times of disease. Children and smallpox. Among all those affected, children are the most vulnerable. In the 17th century, childhood is already marked by constant danger, and smallpox becomes one of its greatest threats. Many families view the disease almost as a cruel rite of passage, believing that those who survive will be protected forever. A little-known fact is that some parents preferred their children to be exposed to smallpox early, hoping to guarantee future immunity. The loss of children shapes entire generations, leaving deep emotional scars across communities. Schools close, homes grow quieter, and constant fear changes how parents see the future. Every sick child represents not only a life at risk, but the fragility of a world that still does not know how to protect itself. Fear, religion, and superstition. Faced with the inexplicable, people search for meaning wherever they can find it. Smallpox is seen by many as divine punishment, a test of faith, or the result of invisible forces. Churches become places of refuge, but also centers of collective anxiety. Prayers, processions, and promises multiply. A curious detail is that some communities believed certain saints offered specific protection against smallpox, creating unique rituals. Amulets, symbols, and superstitious practices gain space in daily life. At the same time, others distrust excessive faith, fearing that religious gatherings may worsen the situation. The disease reinforces old beliefs and creates new ones, showing how fear shapes behavior when science cannot yet offer clear answers. The first steps toward prevention. Even amid confusion, certain observations begin to stand out. People who survive smallpox rarely fall ill again. This simple yet powerful detail sparks curiosity. In different regions, rudimentary preventive practices emerge, still poorly understood and surrounded by risk. A little-known fact is that these early ideas face strong social resistance, seen as dangerous or contrary to divine will. Even so, the notion that disease could be controlled slowly begins to circulate. It is not science as we know it today, but it marks the beginning of a shift in mindset. Smallpox, paradoxically, plants the seeds of modern prevention by forcing people to observe patterns and consequences. The legacy of smallpox. Smallpox leaves deep scars in the 17th century, but its impact reaches far beyond that time. It transforms how humanity understands disease, contagion, and collective responsibility. The suffering accumulated over generations pushes forward questions that can no longer be ignored. The history of smallpox is also the history of human learning, built from mistakes, losses, and quiet observations. Looking back at this past makes it clear that many achievements of modern medicine were born from an urgent need to survive. Remembering smallpox is not only about revisiting a tragedy, but about recognizing how fear and curiosity shaped the world we live in today. If this journey into the past sparked new reflections, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments which part of this story impacted you the most.